Hello and welcome to the Halo Forge Epidemic. This is Yardbird92 and I'm here with AbleSir Thomas.
Hey guys.
And we're going to continue with our next video in our series of invasion mechanics videos. And what we're going to talk about this time is the initial invasion concepts. We're going to talk about the initial setup of your map after you've chosen a location for it. You can see we're in Hemorrhage right now. We just kind of chose this location, and in a later video we will actually go into the ideas you have to consider when you're choosing your location, but for now let's just consider Hemorrhage. And one of the important things you need to consider when you're setting up your map is you want to separate it into two separate sections. You've got the the tier 1 play space and the tier 2, tier 3 play space. They actually do tiers 2 and tier 3 do actually take place in the same area, and we'll go into that in a minute. Well, let's just go back here for now. And the other thing we want to recommend is that you actually go into matchmaking and play invasion matchmaking. Look for the concepts that we're discussing in these videos and see how they actually take place in a map so you can better understand them. People don't realize that they're there, but they really are. So you can see that we've got some struts lined up here, and these struts are actually going to represent possible locations for our attackers' initial spawns and their respawn points. You've got, obviously, there's a right team, a left team, and a middle team. Their roles are very much defined, and there's no confusing which team you are off of spawn. That's a very important concept. So now that we've got a rough location of where they're going to start, we have to pick where they're going to go. And we're going to use our sprint math here, and we're actually going to make 2 sprints forward to get to the objectives. But you'll notice right about the recharge time of the first sprint, there's this rock right here. This rock is here to represent what our neutral territory is going to be. This is going to be the area that the attackers want to control so they can spawn their buddies in, and the defenders want to keep the attackers out just so they don't get to spawn here, so they can keep control of the map. This is an important area to consider. So after we've got our first sprint, we're going to continue with the second sprint, and we'll see that the second sprint, after it recharges, brings us right up to these 2 blocks sticking out of the wall, or sticking out of the ground, and a brace large right there. I forget the names sometimes. These 2 blocks right here are here to represent our 2 objectives, and you'll notice that they are roughly a sprint apart, which is a good distance. Depending on the map, you may want that a little bit more, a little bit less, but a sprint is a good math count. And this brace large right here is here to represent a line of sight blocker that we have to consider. I mean, you don't want somebody to stand right in the middle of the 2 objectives and be able to attack them both at the same time. You'll see with this idea here, you can't defend one from the other, and that's a very important concept to consider. This wall coliseum right here represents the end of the tier 1 play space, and as you cross it, you're entering into the tier 2, tier 3 spaces where Able, I think you'll take over.
Yeah. With me and Yardbird kind of differ on our design and invasion maps. Yardbird likes to build forward from tier 1, and we decided to structure the video that way because it's less confusing. I like to build backwards because I feel that tier 2 and tier 3 need the most exceptions in a map. But onwards from that, your tier 2, tier 3 they're going to have a lot of similar distances and a lot of similar rules from the first phase, but there's going to be some key differences. Now, the same sprint math that we were doing earlier is still here. You have about a sprint to the neutral territory, and of course all this is just placeholder. It's going to be a lot more expanded in a full map. And then, of course, another sprint brings you to your second tier objectives. Now, along with that, you do want your weapon spawns for tier 2 and tier 3 to be on your right next to your respawn zones for tier 2 and tier 3 for your attackers. You want those attackers to be able to find those weapons and pick them up and get into the battle. And it also helps if you have your tier 2 and tier 3 in the same area, because if you were to separate them, you would have issues with, let's say an attacker completing a phase and then picking up what was the defender's weapons and then using them against the defenders in the next phase. You have all sorts of nasty issues like that and horrible phase transitions. So it helps if you just have them in the same area. And along with that, having them in the same area, you have to consider a focal point. Your focal point is kind of your goal in the map. It's what you're attacking from the beginning. If you think of Spire, when you start out in the initial loadout camera, you see the Spire in the background. You understand, I have to get up there and get that core. If you look at Boneyard, once you take the first phase, you see this whole refinery open up, and you got to understand, well, I got to get in there and I got to get the core out of there. And even on Breakpoint, you have the same focal point with the retrieval area. So it helps having just almost a complex to where you have to infiltrate that complex to get access to that core and then pull the core out. Now, also with that, we have the core objective. And now in this map, we have the turret here representing the core. And it's a good thing to do when you're forging is to have the turret as the core because it's the same run speed as a core objective would be in game.
It's very
So when you're
close.
thinking about when you're thinking about where you want it, it's a good thing to use. Now with your core cap point, you want it along the neutral territory, and you want it to also be about 30 seconds away from the core spawn. So that allows basically defenders to be able to shut down a core push, but at the same time, gives attackers a chance to hold off defenders and capture the core. It's a good in between ground, a good neutral point. And you definitely have to worry about this core cap being a neutral ground. It's very important. And of course, the same line of sight blocker rules apply for the second phase, and the same sprint distances between territories apply for the second phase as well. Like I said, those generally cross over pretty well. And I think that's about all the points we need to cover on this one.
I think we're pretty good
Um,
here. We just wanted to bring out this idea for you guys to have the two separate play spaces. And you can see that they're definitely well defined. You've got Tier 1 over there and Tier 2, Tier 3 play space here. We're giving you a little bit of sprint math on how to consider the objective distances, spawning distances, and then along with that, you've got this idea that you can have your weapon spawns for Tiers 2 and Tier 3 in the same location, so that you're not worried about the different teams taking the other team's weapons and whatnot. So I think we're pretty good.
Yeah, and we'll be getting a lot more into each specific tier as well as into to map locations, a lot more into neutral ground as well here in the future. And like Yarbird said earlier, we definitely recommend that you play lots of Matchmaking Invasion because the more you play Matchmaking Invasion, the more you understand it, the better you are going to be at forging Invasion. It's a naturally crosses over. And I would also recommend that you even find a buddy that likes forging and you both jump in Invasion, then forge together because Invasion is great if you're working with somebody on it, just because there's so many factors to think of. And also, guys, don't forget to add our Invasion gamer tag. It'll be in the description below. Definitely need more people to jump on that so we can get some more Invasion customs, as well as even Invasion matchmaking night set up.
All
So
right.
I think that's about is it, guys.
I think we're pretty
I guess
good. This is Yarbird 92 and AbleSir Thomas with the Halo Forge Epidemic, and we're signing off.